told that the remarks I gave last night at the EUC meeting, where I introduced 350 Austin to the Electric Utility Commission, I told them who we were and why we were there. And since you are members, you might want to know what I said about who we are and why we were there. Because if you don't like it, I'd like to know about it, and I can do better. And anyway, this is public now, so this might be a good thing to know that what's been said publicly about us. The other thing is the rest of my remarks have been attached, and there's this cover of people boiling in a pot of frogs boiling in a pot of water, which I'm hoping one of our artists will say. This says, "All in favor of waiting until someone invites us out of the pot." Like that, like that's not going to happen. But if somebody changed that to something like, "Oh, these fossil fuels make us so warm and toasty." And then the last part of the handout has this picture, which I think we'd love to have an artist change to several of us holding hands and leaping out together, helping each other out of the boiling pot. But in between those two things, just for your edification, there are these charts. And these charts are very sobering because these charts show, this is from the Princeton Geoscience Group, shows that we're already at 410. Well, instead of 350, we're already at 410. And we're on our way to, they estimate, 500. So here's some scientific documentation for those of you who are more technically minded and want to know, well, what's going on here and how bad is it? And what do we have to do about it? I've been asked to present to you this resolution. This resolution was presented to the environmental Democrats on Friday. They voted for it unanimously, I think, except for one curmudgeon who said some other comment. And so
they need further study.
Further study, yeah. Which, of course, is what this is. This resolution is for a study to be done independently through the City of Austin Auditor's Office. The language is very specific in here. It says through the Auditor's Office for an external independent study, not through Austin Energy or any of the usual people that they drag in to do studies. So that's one thing about this. Second thing is, this is just a study. It's a study to show the impact of all these businesses moving into Austin and all the people they're bringing with them on the resources we have. Do we have the resources to double our population by 2030? Looking ahead, how sustainable are some of these things that are being done in the names of the taxpayers of Austin? And as I was presenting this, 2 minutes left, as I was presenting this at the Austin Democrats meeting, I realized, thanks to Dale, that I hadn't been specific enough in this resolution about the effects of climate change. But at the very last minute, we changed some of this language in here to reflect that the part of the study would be done on the impacts of climate change, of the growth, of the sustainability of the growth of these, or not, of all these people coming to Austin. So it's been handed out. There are copies up here for those of you who didn't pick up a copy. They're right here. Okay, and I'll pass them around. Why this is important is because this has never been done before. As obvious as this has never been done before. And the city has plenty of money to do it, and the city auditor's office has money in its budget to do stuff just like this. And so it's there for your edification. I went through it, and I changed the environmental Democrats to 350 Austin, just in case we wanted to do it as a demonstration to the city council that we think it's important to do. So wherever it says environmental Democrats, I changed it to 350 Austin. And then I added in the second be it further resolved, at the end of that, I added, which I thought we might be interested in, and what the sustainability impact of these jobs and the resources for these jobs will be on the Austin metro area. So, is there some, do you want to have discussion on this, or?
And the mayor said, he was there.
The mayor said, sure, if this is as simple as what I think it is, I'd be happy to support it. So, and I think we have a lot of friends on that committee who will support it.
Do we have maybe a minute or two for any comments or discussion?
Oh, Danny took it to, who'd you take it to, Danny?
The South Travis United Democrats, and the people there said it was stupid we didn't already have this. and that was Braden, and they endorsed it unanimously. That was last night.
And I know it's on its way to the Tejano Dens, and I know Vicky's taking it to some other dens, and so it's just beginning to roll. I think a lot of people are going to get behind this. The more groups that support it, the more chance the committee of the city council will do it.
So I think what we're going to do to decide if this is something we want to support, we'll give maybe 1 minute or so more if anybody else has further comments, and then we'll just do an informal show of hands here among who's here in the room. If that achieves a majority, we'll take it to our steering committee, and the steering committee will make a final decision reflecting the vote of the room. So,
Questions? Yeah.
questions?
Yeah, I think it's well worth supporting. I mean, when we look at projections that say we're gonna double our population in 25 years, nobody's gonna double the lake, you know, we're gonna force people to get the water from. And so we've got to be very sensitive to that. How are we gonna, you know, we just can't keep saying yes to every development that comes along. We really need to analyze the impacts, and I think that's a good way to do this.
Yes,
Well, I mean, I believe that we have a huge traffic problem.
absolutely.
But I'm not sure what you're trying to do with respect to climate change.
Well,
Because I don't think we know what the weather will be in 2 weeks.
right, absolutely, good point. But we do know based on scientific studies like the ones I handed out tonight, we do know the growth of CO2, the projected growth of CO2. And we do know a bunch of other things. And we do know that we've not got enough lakes to feed the people in a drought here we already got. We know that we don't have enough traffic situations to already take care of the people that are in cars. So we just want to find out. This is a study to find out.
Then cut it for a second. I'm a scientist, I have a PhD in physics. And there's been no proof that CO2 in the atmosphere has anything to do with climate change. So now help me to understand why you believe this, because it's a belief, it's not true. Okay? And I think demonstrate pretty easily why CO2 in the atmosphere is a very good gas. It's important. We've had CO2 up to about 5,000 parts per thousand, and it's made things, per million, thank you. And it made things very good in the Jurassic period, where we had lots of plants and lots of animals, and they were eating and whatever. And those plants got killed somehow, and that created our oil.
Okay.
Now we have oil and gas.
Steve?
In the Jurassic period, the sun was not as bright, not as luminous as it is now. There was 30% less luminous when the Earth was formed. About, I don't know, during the Jurassic, it was maybe 2 to 3% less luminous than it is now, requiring more greenhouse gases for life to survive. Without the greenhouse gases, life wouldn't survive.
Lest we get off into a scientific discussion right now, what's on the table is this resolution. So, any other, Danny?
Yeah, I would just like to move this resolution, and because it calls for a study and ask for a vote of this.
Second.
No, I say.
Let's have a raise of hands. Who is in favor of supporting
Who
this
is in
resolution?
favor of supporting it? Just raise your
Yeah.
hand.
Welcome.
And we've got,
You want to vote?
is there anyone who is opposed to supporting this resolution?
Okay, those who don't want to support the resolution, put your hand up.
You did.
Okay, well, he missed his
Let me
chance.
clarify, I was a little bit tuned out, Dana, I apologize. So I'm not quite sure what Dana explained to y'all, because we do not have membership. What we are doing is simply getting a show of hands, and then the steering committee will attempt to reflect the wishes of the group in the formal decision. Okay? So I would say we have a strong majority.
Well, nobody voted against it, so we have a unanimous.
Yeah.
The other thing is that these bookmarks are here, they're free, please take one. As Dana said to me, this is a great organization, they can send books to Texas prisoners for free. We're all about the environment. Bring any books that you don't want in your house anymore, bring them to our meetings at 3:50, and we'll see that they get sent to Texas prisoners.
All right. Thank you, Richard. So we have another resolution next on the agenda. Danny is going to come and present about off fossil fuel bill that is being proposed by Representative Tulsi Gabbard.
The bill is 3671, and it is supported by 350 nationally, and there's a list of a whole lot of 350 locals and other groups. And what it basically calls for is to have a transition in society be planned as we move against fossil fuels. And it says that it's claiming that climate change is an emergency right now and that we have to do stuff to protect our environment. There's a bunch of stuff in here. I don't want to go through all of this, but we're asking the local 351 to take whatever you call it, a sense of the group to vote for it. And then if we do, for the steering committee, to provide 2 peak representatives to go to a meeting with Doggett to try to get his support. Right now, there's 35 congressmen who are supporting this bill, 3671. The last time there was a major environmental bill in Congress, it got stopped by the leader of 350 and Naomi Klein because it called for trading off carbon. And when it was all said and done, it really did not deal with the real problems with the environment. So this, if you look through the groups that are supporting this, I think we would be in good company. And that if we're going to support it, we shouldn't just support it. We should have 2 representatives go to a meeting with Congressman Doggett and ask him to get on board. I think the target for Texas is to get him and Al Green from Houston to be the first 2. So is there any questions on this?
I think we have time for 2 questions or comments for this.
I don't know, if you had a question. I'm not that good, I'm not very good at physics, but if you had a question, I would try to answer. No?
Approval.
Okay.
Second.
Yeah, let's take a vote, show of hands in support of this, supporting this resolution. Okay, seems like we got a healthy majority here. So we'll take that to the steering committee and they will make the formal decision based on those votes.
Can I ask for opposed?
Oh yeah, sorry,
Sure.
opposed? Okay, thank you. Okay, next we're gonna have Gil come forward and he's gonna talk about a letter we received from the Austin Integrated School District, Independent School District, sorry, on solar panels on all AISD schools.
As Dana said, we just this morning received this letter from Environment Texas and Luke Metzger. They're actually, I think it's written by Luke, who's the executive director. The net of the letter says that because of the bond, the school bond that was passed last year, within that bond, $10 million were earmarked for solar panels on AISD schools, and that very little of it has been spent. And so the point behind this letter is to ask the AISD superintendent to see to it that that money is spent to put solar panels on the roofs of all the schools. Now the claim in the letter, I haven't been able to check this, but the claim in the letter is there's 44 schools already powered by solar, and that this money plus the discounts through Austin Energy is enough to put solar panels on every school in AISD. So they're asking to see if we would be willing to support that.
Okay,
Any questions?
question 2, questions or comments from the room?
Who's asking first to support it?
Environment Texas, basically. They wrote
Luke
the letter.
Metzger.
Yeah, Luke Metzger.
I guess I would ask our resident, Dale Bulick, to comment on this because he served on AISD Sustainable Energy Committee groups for a long time. What do you think about this?
Well, our committee proposed things like this like almost 10 years ago. There was never any money for it. And I'm tickled. I didn't know that it was some earmarked in the bonds for that purpose. I supported the bond package, but I didn't realize that there was 10 million set aside. The great thing about that is when the schools are closed in the summer, they're going to be pouring electricity back into the grid and saving all of us money. So I think it should be a no-brainer.
Bobby?
I would have a recommendation, and that is that we support it on the condition that Luke can provide us with the evidence that the money has actually been set aside in the bond.
Just a quick comment, I support that, because I was so focused last year on the impact on schools on the east side that I didn't see a lot of other stuff that was in it. So I think that's a good caveat as we vote, that we figure that out. And if it stands as written, refer it to the steering committee.
I guess I would also offer the caveat that perhaps it's not needed that they equitably provide solar panels on all the schools as they go to put them on the schools, that they put them on in an equitable way between all the parts of
So it's not just.
town. So
claim
there's
is
no
to
left
cover
behind.
every
There are
school.
no left behind.
Yes.
Right.
Well, it may depend too on which ones are accountable or susceptible to shading and other
Yeah, that's
factors.
true, too.
So they need to put them where it gets the most sun, obviously.
Okay, well,
Never mind, I withdraw mine. Hopefully they'll be fine.
Becky, it is still a good point to make.
You withdrew that, Becky?
Okay, one more for Al.
I also support it because it gives a real opportunity for the science teachers and curriculum people to point up on the roof and talk about solar and environment and renewable energy is as a natural part of the school program.
And most
And
schools
it's
have,
called for here, but I'd like to see that emphasized.
the schools that have it now also have apps that the students can actually see where real-time production is and do all kinds of math projects with it.
That's really good.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Second,
One more?
Sorry, I'll take one more. I'll take one more.
5 megawatts of solar for that money, probably more, which is over 16,000. So it's gonna cover a lot of schools.
Okay, let's do a vote. Who is in support of supporting this letter? Okay. Anybody opposed? No opposed? Okay, we'll take that to the steering committee as well. Thank you all. So now for our primary presentation of the evening, I'm going to invite Al on stage to talk about the Fayette Coal Plant.
All right now.
I think everything did work, so I was good.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me tonight, and it lets me talk about one of my favorite subjects, which is closing the Fayette Coal Plant. When we started on this, or when I started on it, people have been working on this for decades, but when I started on back in 2012, I thought it was a simple matter of bring a resolution, get city council behind it, they would say, shut it down, and that would be the end of it. Well, it turns out it's very, very complicated. It's probably the most complicated plant in Texas to close, and possibly in the United States, because it's really not owned by Austin Energy. It's 1/3 owned by Austin Energy, and it's 2/3 owned by LCRA. And there's a lot of complex contractual arrangements in there that don't put us in the driver's seat. So the idea that we could just pass a resolution and close it, we really didn't know what it was going to look like to close it, but I think we're getting closer to it. We have a commitment to close our share in 2023 in the generation plan. And so we're starting to see, well, what does it look like to really close at least our part of it? And if we can do that, what is required further to get the rest of it? I think, as in many things, the market is really turning dramatically against coal, and that's our ally more than a whole bunch of people jumping up and down. And I'll show you that in a minute. So back in 2007, there was a coal rush in Texas. There was a proposal to build 18 new coal plants because there was a fear in the utility industry that carbon regulations were coming and they had to get these plants approved quickly so that they'd be grandfathered, so that as they may take several years to build, at least they'd already have them on the books. And our illustrious Governor Rick Terry, who's now the Secretary of Energy, tried to push that through TCEQ. So there's a protest at the Capitol in 2007, And one of the leaders of that, you probably recognize, is Smitty Smith, who has been around a long time working on these kinds of issues. Also, ironically, the No One Who Coal Plants t-shirts were printed by Chesapeake Energy, which is a big natural gas supplier. So as this was going on, most of these, I think 16 of the 18 plants were proposed by TXU. And all of a sudden, this Wall Street came in and this big company scooped them right up and said, we're not going to build those coal plants. And I was so impressed and happy. And I thought, Wall Street has the white hats. Really, these environmentalists from Wall Street, this is cool. Well, what they really wanted to do was buy TXU really cheap and use the coal plants that they already had and just run the heck out of them. And they didn't want to invest in any new plants. So that's the long and short of it. But out of those 18, only one got built, and it was a smallerish one near Waco. And the rest didn't. So that's a good outcome for kind of a crazy situation. Here's what the coal plants look like in Texas. And the red ones are still running full out. The gray ones are shut down, and the yellow ones are under consideration. But what you see there is a big band right across from east of Dallas down through to San Antonio is a big band. And what's in that band is a whole lot of lignite. And lignite is the cheapest, dirtiest coal there is. And there's a mess of it all through Texas. And many of the Texas coal plants were designed to dig lignite out of the ground and not even put it in a train to conveyor it right into the coal plant. And so this mine you may or may not be familiar with, but this is just 30 miles from here. It's in Elgin. And it feeds, or it did, luckily it's shutting down this year, it fed its coal 22 miles by conveyor to Sandow up by Rockdale. And the reason the conveyor is 22 miles long is because over the life of this coal plant, it has dug 22 miles basically across Texas and had to lengthen the conveyor as it went. So give you a quick overview. And this is from Wikipedia, so I know it's true. This is a list of the coal plants in Texas. And I'm going to pass, I'll put this online. We'll put it on the 350 website so you'll be able to see it in detail. You could also just Google coal plants in Texas and it will take you to Wikipedia. But this shows you the coal plants that are in the state, and there's a total of 19 gigawatts still operational, almost 20 gigawatts. This year, 2018, 4,200 megawatts are closing down, and that includes the Sandow plant in Rockdale, it includes Monticello and Big Brown, and those two are among the biggest polluters in the state of Texas, and they were also mine-to-mouth plants burning lignite and conveying it right into this place. Now these plants are owned by TXU, who's going through bankruptcy, and they've declared, we can't run these economically anymore, we're closing them down. And so what I never expected was that would happen. But what's happened is that solar and wind are now cheaper than coal, and natural gas is cheaper than coal. And those three combined are making it very uneconomic to continue to run the old outdated coal plants. So on this list is Fayette up near the top, also JT Dealey, which is owned by San Antonio, that's going to be closing. Our portion of Fayette, which you'll see is 570 megawatts, is our third of Fayette, is committed to close in 2023. The remainder of that, owned by LCRA, we don't have any commitments on, and we'll talk about later. Many of these other plants are also owned by TXU and are similarly under economic stress. So we'll see how they fare in the next couple of years. But the likelihood is that gas, wind, and solar will take them down. And it's actually easier to go bankrupt than to negotiate the city and LCRA and all those other things. So that might happen for us. So here's our plant. This is Fayette. Fayette has 3 power units. The one on the right, or on the left, excuse me, is unit number 3, which is the newer one, built in 1988, and that's owned exclusively by LCRA. And we don't really have any influence on that. And that coal yard over there feeds the conveyors to number 3. So what's really owned between Austin and LCRA are units 1 and 2. And let me zero in a little closer on that. This is what that looks like. The chimney for 1, 2, and then this big fat stack in the middle is the scrubber, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But the issue there is these 2 units are each 50% owned by Austin Energy and LCRA. We don't own one and they own one. We both own half. And the contract says that those shares are undivided and that we can't negotiate to own one or the other. And what you'll see is that there's a lot of entanglement. Not only, I mean, you have the boilers and the generators for each one, but the coal pile, all the conveyors, the scrubber, all that stuff has to operate whether one operates or not, and all has to be maintained. So it really entangles us quite a bit. The agreement with LCRA was first reached in 1974, and there have been some amendments to it, and I have never seen a copy of that, so I can only speak to what I've seen in the press and other reports. But LCRA is the managing partner of the operation in Fayette. And the whole operation in Fayette has separate books and separate management. So we can't look into Austin Energy's financials and see what's going on in Fayette. We can't see how much coal costs, what the efficiencies are. All of that is kept within the operation of Fayette itself. Each partner has a 50% undivided ownership, and each partner has the right of first refusal in the event of sale. And it's a very cumbersome one. It says that you have 7 months after a bona fide offer is made to determine if you want to make a counteroffer, and then you have 3 months to make that counteroffer. The bottom line is that in the fast-moving world of business, that's like a poison pill. But the other thing is that who the hell wants to buy it? I mean, these things are going out of business. So the only entity who might ever want to buy it, seems like, would be LCRA if they thought they wanted more coal power. No other financial party would probably jump into this. So selling it's not really an option anymore. It might have been 10 years ago, but I don't think it is now. Unit 1 was built in 1979, Unit 2 in 1980. And at that time, they were both grandfathered for sulfur dioxide. If you remember back in the 70s, acid rain was a big deal, not climate change. And all the forests in the East Coast were dying and everything, so they were trying to reduce sulfur emissions. But these 2 units were grandfathered, and they had until 2010 to deal with the sulfur dioxide. LCRA's Unit 3 was built a few years later, and it was built with the scrubber to take care of the sulfur dioxide at that time. So the scrubber was built in 2010, cost $400 million, and has 30-year bonds on it that are due in approximately 2040. And I don't know a lot about those bonds, but I understand they're not callable or pay offable early. They're just out there, and that's life. So that's an issue too in closing the plant, is we still have the indebtedness for those bonds, whether we close the plant or not. Here's the scrubber as it looks like from outer space. Thank you, Google Earth. And what you can see looking down over here are the 2 combustion chambers, and then originally the smoke from that would have gone through this flue and up this chimney and out. The scrubbers are these huge units here that make a slurry of limestone, and the gas passes through that, and the sulfur dioxide mates with the limestone and turns into stuff that they can make wallboard out of. And then the remaining gas is passed up through the chimney and out. And that one chimney services both plants. Now the scale of this thing is just enormous. There's a little white dot up there. I don't know if you can see that dot. That's a pickup. Pickup truck, yeah. So we're talking a big thing. In 2010, $400 million would have bought him a nice shiny new gas plant. which would have emitted less carbon dioxide and sulfur. But at the time, in 2007, gas was still expensive, and the projection was that it was going to stay expensive. So coal looked like the winning bet, and then fracking came along and just took that right off the table. So, looking at the agreement, what we've done in the generation plan and through many city council resolutions which have been passed, I didn't bring all those up tonight, but directing Austin Energy to negotiate with LCRA. And there's a bunch of things in the agreement that make that difficult. First is the right of first refusal, which makes it difficult to sell the plant. But we don't want to sell it, we want to close it. We don't want to sell it and have somebody else run it. So that's not a concern. But we have to maintain minimum operation levels because the efficiency of the plant drops off dramatically when you get below about 40% output. So you just can't effectively run it at less than that. So the contract calls for us, or for both parties, to maintain certain minimum levels of output. It also calls for both parties to pay for a fixed percentage of operation and maintenance costs, 50% in our case of units 1 and 2, and 33% of the entire facility. You know, the outside grounds, the fencing, the guard, everything about it, we still pay a third of, whether we run it or not. And there's a prohibition in the contract about partition of the facility. So the contract says you can't divide it up. Now you could negotiate to divide it up, but as it stands, that's something that would have to be worked on. There's also some prohibitions in the city charter about recovering costs if the plant's not in a used and useful condition. If we're not operating it, we shouldn't be charging I get carried away on this, thank you. We shouldn't be charging those fees in our bills, so how are we going to deal with that? There's just a lot to work on. But we still have committed to do it by 2023. The negotiations are being held confidentially between the legal department and city council, so none of this is out in the public. We don't know about it, but we just need to keep the pressure on. We may not be party to knowing what's going on, but we can very much be party to keeping the pressure on to make sure that council gets reports on this frequently, and that those reports are motivation to keep the action going. So we don't know LCRA's short-term and long-term interest. We don't know if we could maybe swap for Unit 3 and shut that down. That seems a practical solution, but it may not fly. We're promised that action is ongoing, and hopefully the mayor says we'll have good news by the end of the year. But we can count on that, we can trust that, we need to keep the pressure on. I won't tell you all about LCRA because that will take me another 5 minutes. But they're the other party to this, and there's a lot to learn about them in terms of how do we put pressure on them for the other 2/3 of the plant. Last night at the meeting, at the electric utility meeting, I asked for 5 things, and Karen Haddon spoke up and asked that they be reported on at the next EUC meeting by Austin Energy.
She's a commissioner.
She's one of the commissioners, been a commissioner for at least 6 years, a long time.
Vice Chairman.
And is very experienced on this, and thank you, as Vice President of the board. So we've asked for the information on the funds. We were accruing money to pay off those bonds, and I also hear from some other people that's no longer required, that it can be handled some other way. So I'm not sure, but we ought to keep the pressure on to find out. We either need to budget for paying off the bonds, or if we don't need to budget for it, we need to know about it. Any event, we should hear about it. We need quarterly reports to council on the status of negotiations to keep the pressure on the negotiations, whether we know about the details or not. We need to find out what the output of Fayette is. Austin Energy no longer reports that, and it used to be pretty easy to find out. We believe it's running faster than it should be as a wholesale merchant plant, and that's very much counter to our carbon budget and our efforts at climate change. Fourth, Public Citizen showed a couple of years ago that this plant and 6 others were losing money. 3 of those 6 have shut down. And so we need an analysis of whether Fayette is in fact making money, and if not, how much it's costing us to keep it open. And we want to return to the kinds of detail reports that we used to get in 2012 and before for the operation of Fayette, which helps us to understand what's going on. For organizing efforts, July 30th, CAIBA is holding a meeting of a coalition to work on strategy at Public Citizen. Everybody should be involved in that, and you and other groups can plan our next steps here. Also, I'll show you in a minute, but the Team Shirts attended last night's meeting at the Electric Utility Commission, and then we also need to talk about long-term what our organizing strategy is for LCRA. I know Sierra Club and some other groups have put a lot of work into that. It's not easy. It's a tough road to hoe, but that's what we've got to work on next. And so here is Team Shirts last night at the electric utility meeting. And I think we really made our presence known, and thanks to Richard for explaining who we were and why we were there, and for everybody else who showed up. I think we've got their attention now in a positive, in a constructive way, respectful way, and we need to keep that up and make the most of it. So that's what I've got. Any questions?
Questions?
So, I like the terrific presentation, Al. Thank you very much. And very comprehensive. To speak to the statement about follow. Al is for all of you who don't know, Al is a master photographer. He has lots of pictures of Fayette and other related things. And I'm just wondering if between now and the next meeting, you think of some things that you can do that will raise the consciousness and attention of this, whether it's getting some additional T-shirts that have a picture of Fayette on the back of it with a big line through it or something like that. You know? Some other demonstration, blown up pictures of Fayette with all that crap coming out of the steam that we could hold off at the next meeting, or we could blow up and make it stand up in the entranceway to the Electric Utility Commission meeting and any other meeting where people have say over Fayette. Just something that really tells the story of how that plant is killing our atmosphere and poisoning. I think would be something for the steering committee to think about how we could be more visible in next events.
Well, I'd certainly be willing to, support with the pictures and all that. We'll have CSC meetings between now and then. The electric utility meeting is the 13th. They moved it up a week from their normal time because of the time to provide some of the members time to analyze the budget. But certainly by then, yeah.
I'd just like to ask a question. Theoretically, you're doing things, but unfortunately, we have Germany who's building coal plants as fast as they can. While Germany with electricity and China is building as many plants as they can to supply the army. They're building it now.
They're pulling the plug on lots of their coal
building
plants.
today. They're ready online today. So, one plant doesn't matter. Because we actually all put together.
Every plant matters.
I think this is the one we have control of. I don't have control of China and Germany. I see
You don't
China.
really have control.
I see China building huge amounts of solar farms, and I see them building coal plants, but also canceling.
Yeah.
I think Dave.
Canceling, then it's not any different than, still building.
Yes, sir.
That's a question. So because it's a merchant plant, they sell it to the ERCOT market. How does that, do you know how that accounts for loss of energy? Whenever they're generating electricity, is that accounting for loss of energy electricity mix? Or are they separate because they're buying on one side and they're bidding in on another side? So it's just curious if that counts for the loss of energy generation mix whenever they're generating electricity in the ERCOT market.
Yes, it would. It counts against our carbon budget. I'm not.
Yeah.
Everything that everybody generates now goes into ERCOT, and we buy back everything
Right,
we
so
use
also,
from
for
ERCOT.
example, we'll have contracts with wind farms and solar plants at certain times of day. So are they automatically, even if they're not technically using electricity, with their contracts are stated? Or are they stated? I'm just curious. I don't know if whenever they're selling into the market, are they automatically buying that power back for the way the contract is structured? Or would
You
they
mean like
be
for a wind
separated
farm?
from that contractually because they're buying from here and they're selling here? It's two different untethered operations. Just curious as to how they're accounting for that from the standpoint of their generation mix.
It's B.
Does that make sense?
It's
I'm not sure how your question's, if they have a contract with a wind farm for X dollars, the wind farm is selling it to ERCOT and we're buying it back from ERCOT.
But we're contracted with that wind farm. aren't we?
Yeah, right. But if we're selling coal into the market, we're just selling into the market. We don't necessarily have a buyer lined up for that. We just,
Exactly, so that's what I'm saying, Austin Energy can run that coal plant all day long and not have to account for it as part of the energy generation, because it's a completely separate transaction. That's what I'm just curious. if
No, they-
no, it's part of our generation.
Sorry, could you repeat that, Al? I didn't hear that.
It would be part of our generation mix if they sell it wholesale. But
if it's not serving the load of Austin for all of our, the way we're contracted in the market. I'm just trying to understand when Austin Energy says this is our generation, this is our mix of what's serving our load, is that Fayette Coal Plant necessarily involved in it when it's running, or is it completely separate transaction because it's maybe going to the market and someone else is buying it? I'm just wondering if that's.
I think from our point of view, anything that we're selling into the market, less than 100% of our load is considered ours. We account for as ours.
The
But,
financial report
Yeah.
that was presented at the EUC meeting, I think you were away. But part of the concern that a number of us have is that so there's what we need as Austin, the city of Austin, what we need
Right.
to meet our needs. And then there is what they're generating. And they are generating more than what we need. And that gets sold into the market. And so you have to keep in mind, this is the tricky part about Austin Energy. It's a municipal utility, but it's also a generating company. And so it's part of the conflict that actually the city is going to have to deal with sooner or later, city council, because it creates basically an ethical conflict when they are generating from the coal plant and increasing our emissions in the city of Austin so that they can sell money and sell on the open market to make money. And the conflict is that you've got the council being responsible for the city budget, and 15 to 20% of the city budget comes from Austin Energy. And so there is this inherent
Conflict.
tension
yeah,
between, are we going to generate as much as we can so that we can make more money when our emissions are actually going up despite what council has said they were committed to. Our emissions are going up, not down.
Right, but I assume that, that Fayette plant's gonna start up, going to the marketplace, which is a certain living level. Like, it's gonna trigger Fayette to start, right? Because it's also, like I said, it's tied into SCRA. Austin Energy does not have complete say, right, on where that thing triggers to go.
I believe above the minimum point, we can say we want some more or not, while our CRA can ramp up more or less. But between the minimum running point and the full out capacity, we can kind of act independently with our shares if we chose to.
I think we do have that power.
Yeah.
One of the commissioners made that comment, my boss. made the
Yeah.
comment.
But that's why one of our big asks is to report on the actual running, capacity levels that they're running at. So we know, are we running this thing as a merchant plant or just to serve our needs? Austin Energy also buys roughly 15% of their power. So the aggregate of all of our generation is actually a little less than we use on average, but then averages, are like this. So, yeah.
Did I hear you right? You're saying that we're not sure whether this plant could be losing money?
We don't know if it's losing
Right.
money. We say it could be.
So if it could be losing.
Public Citizens consultant said it was,
Okay.
but
Can I ask you, is there any reason why, if we're losing, if we're losing money, or even coming close to it, we couldn't just shut it down and continue to pay off the bonds? I mean, to me, it doesn't make any sense if we're losing money that we're operating something that we don't want.
Right.
There's a stipulation in the city charter that you can't charge people through their electric bills for something that they're not receiving. In other words, we're not receiving anything from that plant, but we're just paying off the bond on it. So there's a prohibition in the city charter against
But then who
charging
makes it?
you on your electric bill for something that you're not receiving a good from. Does that make sense?
But in that case, that charge would be levied, I mean, Austin as a city is still responsible for that bond. So
Yeah.
but if it wasn't charged the utility rate, it would come out of the city budget. So I mean, it's gotta come from somewhere. But by contract, we can't unilaterally shut down our part of it. And if we did, we would be liable for all the maintenance and stuff attributable to it anyway, even if we're getting no output. So that's part of what this whole negotiation dance is, trying to find a clean exit strategy. Like I said, if we owned it, we could decide to shut it down, but since we're the minor partner, we've got to negotiate this up with LCRA and find a way that is fair to the ratepayers, because again, we don't want to just take a $500 million hit and walk away. We can't do that to the ratepayers. So we've got to find a way that keeps within a fair rate and our bond responsibility and shuts it down. It's a delicate dance.
So is that 400 million for the scrubbers?
Half of that is ours.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So 200 million is ours, 200 million.
And how much have we paid off already?
I don't know. There are bonds that are due in 30 years, but I don't know if they're all due in 30 years or if there's some stacking schedule. I really don't know about that.
Sorry
Okay.
sorry to interrupt this great discussion. We are gonna move into the breakout group session, but if anybody's interested in continuing talking about Fayette and the implications of that, I think we're gonna actually designate a breakout group for anybody who wants to chat with Al and kind of delve more into the details. I think that'd be a great thing to have going on right now. So let's see, we got 4 different breakout groups planned. First of all, chatting about Fayette, any questions or further discussion with Al. Al, do you want to pick a corner of the room to be in and see people?
Well,
Yeah, maybe.
here's an empty table.
Let's take that empty table. So after we're done explaining all the breakout groups, if you're interested in that, head over to that table. We're going to have a breakout group about planning some candidate forums for the upcoming election. We want to have the political candidates in the area kind of talk about their views on the environment and climate change. Gil's going to be running that, I believe. Gil, do you want to say a little bit more about what that's going to involve for that breakout group?
No, I think that was a pretty good introduction.
All right. So that's it. If you're interested in planning breakout groups, Gil, where are you going to be in the room? Right there. Okay. So if you're interested in that, meet Gil over there. Becky is going to be talking, discussing the September 8th Day of Action. That's proposed by 350 National, I believe.
It's a bunch of organizations.
A bunch of organizations, so it's a coalition effort. There's going to be groups all over the country talking, planning events locally to highlight the global climate summit that's happening in San Francisco on September 8th. So we want to plan something for Austin. Becky, it's going to be.
I guess we'll go over there.
Yeah, so over in that corner, if you are interested in, Becky, what is it that you're going to have people do?
So we're gonna brainstorm. So if your brain is having a storm after all of this, talk, come over here and we'll think of what we can do here in Austin. That would be fun and make people think about the climate.
Fantastic, thank you. And that's over there in that corner. And then I am going to be running a breakout group about our fossil-free faster campaign that's working with Austin Energy and the City Council. They've had a resolution last year to move towards carbon-free by 2030, and a host of other efforts to kind of become more renewable get more solar panels, more community solar, electric vehicles. There's a bunch of stuff in the resolution. So we're running a campaign to get all of that moving more quickly. So we'll be talking about kind of the latest that's happening with that campaign. And then we have some research projects that are coming up that Ellie Holderman is going to be running.
Yeah, so the first part of our breakout group is going to be just kind of getting an overview of all the different kind of tactics that we're looking at and talking about campaign in general. And then at the end, we'll kind of start diving into some different approaches that y'all might want to take outside of our open meetings for homework. And we're doing a research campaign in particular on Mayor Adler, several council members. So if you have time at home and you want to, do research on the computer, we really are looking for people who can help with that. So
fantastic. Thank you, Ellie. So
Where will you be?
we'll be right there. We'll pick that corner then.
Okay.
Okay. Question?
Will we have a chance to make announcements at the end?
There will be
Or
time
is this a
for-
good time?
Yes, so we'll do
There'll be-
announcements before we close.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are short breakouts tonight.
Yeah, we have a truncated time. Let's give it about 20 minutes or so, and then we'll come back and kind of present the major findings of each breakout group so we can all hear what everybody's done. All right.
Yeah.
Ow.